need you to understand something before this story begins. That lake wasn't just a piece of land. It wasn't just water. It wasn't just scenery for backyard photos and summer barbecues. It was the place that helped me stay alive. When my wife passed 5 years ago, everything in my life turned gray. I moved through days like I was underwater. Slow, heavy, barely breathing. I stopped talking to people. I stopped answering calls. I stopped caring about work or sleep or anything that used to matter. But every morning, I'd walk down to the edge of that lake with a fishing pole in my hand. Not because I cared if I caught anything, but because the water was the only thing that still made sense. The way it moved, the way it reflected the sky, the way it didn't ask anything of me. The lake was quiet when nothing else was. I bought that land years before, back when my wife was still alive. We wanted a place to retire. Something slow, something peaceful, something ours. I paid for every acre clean. No mortgage, no dispute, no shared ownership. The land was mine legally and completely. When the new housing development was built down the road, I didn't think anything of it. I didn't care about new neighbors. I didn't care about HOA newsletters. I didn't care about cul-de-sac drama. I stayed on my land. I fished. I grieved. I healed, slowly, until one morning that peace ended. I was sitting on the old wooden dock my wife and I built together, the board still worn from her footprints, and I suddenly heard high-pitched footsteps slapping the shoreline gravel behind me. A woman's voice, sharp, commanding, but trying to sound pleasant in that way people use when they've already decided they're superior. She said she was the HOA president. She said the lake was now considered a shared neighborhood amenity. She told me I needed to submit a request to fish. On my own lake, on my own dock, on land my wife and I bought outright. I didn't say much. Not then. Not yet. I just asked her why she believed she had any authority here. She smiled. Not a kind smile. A smile that says you don't know who you're talking to. She said, "We maintain the neighborhood standards. You'll need to follow our regulations like everyone else. You don't want to cause problems, do you?" I remember just staring at her. This woman, this stranger, was standing in the exact spot where I held my wife's hand the night before she died. The exact place where I whispered goodbye to someone I loved more than breathing. And she was talking about compliance. She handed me a printed violation notice. A violation. For fishing. Then she turned around and walked back up the hill like she had done something righteous. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just sat there, letting the paper crumple in my hand. Because the HOA didn't just interfere with fishing. They stepped on my memories, my grief, my healing, my home. And that was the moment something inside me woke up. The version of me I lost for 5 years. The version that doesn't back down. So before I tell you how I walked into that HOA meeting with the State Water Commission, before I tell you how the board fell apart, before I tell you how the lake became the center of a fight they never saw coming, I want you to answer one thing for me. Where are you watching from? I'll wait for you in the comments. Also subscribe the channel because I am not alone in this fight, you are also with me. The next morning I drove into town because I wanted one thing. Clarity. No arguments, no assumptions, just the truth on paper. I went to the county recorder's office, walked up to the clerk who had known my wife and me for years, and asked her to pull the documents for the property. She didn't ask why. She didn't question me. She just printed what I requested. There it was, plain and irrefutable. I owned the lake. Not access to it. Not a portion of it. The entire lake. The survey maps from 1988 had the boundary lines drawn well before any neighborhood existed. The land deed listed the lake as part of my property. Water use permits had been renewed under my name. The lake wasn't shared land. It wasn't community space. It was mine legally, fully, and indisputably. When I drove home, another paper was taped to my fence. The language was short, cold, and arrogant. This lake is now officially recognized as a community amenity. HOA regulations apply. Fishing privileges must be approved. No name, no signature, no legal reference. Just an attempt at dominance through printed paper. I stood there holding the notice, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. something deeper. When my wife died, grief hollowed me out. I didn't fight anything. I just endured. But seeing that notice, on the land where she and I built our future together, awakened something that had been buried under sorrow. I wasn't just defending fishing. I was defending memory, history, and the last place in the world where my life had made sense. The HOA scheduled a community meeting 2 days later. I went. I didn't dress up. I didn't come to shout. I sat in the back and listened to them talk. They spoke like the neighborhood was a corporation and they were executives. There was no warmth, no community, just rules, enforcement, and the pride of control. When the HOA president said the lake was now considered a shared neighborhood environment and would fall under HOA regulations, I stood up. Not quickly, just enough that every chair shifted and the room fell quiet. I walked to the front table, took out the folded copy of my deed, and set it down in front of her. I told her calmly that the lake was private property, legally recorded, predating the neighborhood, outside of HOA jurisdiction entirely. She didn't even look at the paper. She just smiled again, that same thin, dismissive smile, and said, "We'll handle this legally." As if that was supposed to scare me, as if I hadn't already lived through the worst loss a person can survive. Threats don't mean much to someone who's already buried their heart once. I walked out without another word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I went home, sat on the dock, and looked at the water. My wife and I built this place so we could grow old together. She didn't get to, but this lake was still the only part of that plan I had left. And there was no force on this earth, not a board, not a rulebook, not a smug smile, that was going to take it from me. I knew exactly who to call, because the state has an entire department dedicated to water rights, ownership boundaries, and riparian law. The HOA picked the wrong battleground, and I wasn't fighting alone. The morning after the HOA meeting, I woke up before sunrise. I didn't sleep much, but not from worry, more like focus. The kind of focus a man has when he knows exactly what needs to be done. I made coffee, sat on the porch swing, watched the lake ripple, and felt something I hadn't felt since before my wife passed. Purpose. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't used in years. It belonged to a man named Raymond Cole, a senior analyst at the State Water Commission, someone I had worked with decades earlier when I was part of a team that helped advise rural land management. Back then, I was younger, sharper, full of plans and ideas. Life was simpler. I dialed. He answered on the second ring, voice weary like someone who had seen too much bureaucracy for one lifetime. He said, "Jack? Is that really you?" I smiled a little. "Yeah, Ray. It's me." He didn't ask how I was doing. People who have known loss don't need to ask. They can hear it in your voice. Instead, I told him what happened. The HOA's claim. The notice, the threats, the deed that nobody bothered to read. Ray didn't curse, but I could hear 90 curses forming behind his silence. "Send me the documents," he said. "I'll have my team pull the historical water rights file. If your paperwork is clean, which I'm sure it is, this HOA has no legal authority. None. Not even to suggest a rule." He said it with the calm confidence of a man who knows the law not as an opinion, but as structure. I emailed everything. Old surveys, riparian maps, the deed, the original subdivision planning memorandum, the one they apparently never bothered to consult before electing themselves kings of the shoreline. By noon, Ray called back, voice sharper now. "Jack, I'm notifying them formally. Also, just so you know, your lake isn't just outside HOA rules. It's protected under state water use classification, meaning any attempt to regulate or modify access without your consent is a violation." He paused. This could get loud. I leaned back and stared at the water. Let it get loud. He laughed gently, not at me but with me, the laugh of two old men who have seen enough life to know that some fights are worth having. We scheduled an official inspection hearing at their next HOA meeting. Not a private conversation, not a warning, not a negotiation, a full, legal, public confrontation. I spent the next 2 days outside working, clearing branches, repairing boards on the dock, oiling the porch swing. Not because the HOA told me to, but because this place is mine. It deserved to be cared for. It deserved to be lived in, not just protected. The evening before the meeting, I sat on the dock as the sun went down, the wood warm under my hands. I remembered sitting there with my wife, her feet skimming the surface, her hair catching the light. We planned to teach grandkids to fish someday. Life had other plans, but I could still protect the memory. I spoke out loud, just softly enough for the lake to hear. I'll take care of it. Promise. The next day, I walked into that HOA meeting calm, steady, and alone. But I wasn't alone. Ray was already there. Not in a suit. Not with a briefcase. Just a clipboard and the law. The HOA board sat up straight when they saw him. Their smiles tightened. Their posture changed. They knew immediately something had shifted. Ray greeted them politely, then turned to me and said, "Ready?" I nodded, and we began. Things were about to change. Not gradually, not respectfully, but completely. The HOA meeting room felt different this time. The chairs were packed tighter, like they expected a show. Neighbors whispered in small clusters, stealing glances at me as if I had somehow disturbed the suburban peace by daring to fish on my own damn lake. The board sat at the front table like a court bench. Same smug president, same pencil-neck treasurer who always looked like he was waiting to tattletale to someone's mom. And sitting right beside them, directly in view, was Ray. Clipboard in hand, glasses low on his nose, calm as a surgeon stepping into an operating room. The president cleared her throat. Her voice had that tone authority wannabes love. Sharp, pointed, theatrical. "Before we begin," she said, "we need to address a violation of community use guidelines regarding the lake." She gestured toward me, not with a full hand, but with 2 fingers, like I was something unpleasant she didn't want to touch. "Mr. Jack has been using the lake without HOA authorization." Ray didn't even look up from his clipboard. He just said quietly, "Authorization isn't required. He owns it." A ripple moved through the room. Some neighbors turned toward each other, whispering, confused. The treasurer tried to jump in, voice cracking slightly. "Well, actually, the lake is listed on our amenities map." Ray finally looked up. "Your map cites no legal authority. The state's records do." He opened a folder slowly, deliberately, the way someone does when they know the weight of what's inside. The president straightened in her chair. Her smile stiffened. "With all due respect," she said, "we have the right to enforce community standards." Ray shook his head once. "No hesitation. You don't have jurisdiction over private water bodies. And this lake is privately owned. Fully. Legally. It was registered before this neighborhood existed." She opened her mouth to argue, but Ray held up one finger, and she froze like some instinct deep inside her remembered what authority actually looked like. He continued, "Not only that, but your attempt to regulate access is classified as interference with riparian property rights, which, by state law, is actionable." The room was silent now. You could hear someone breathing near the window. Somebody coughed. And just like that, the idea of the HOA being all-powerful began to flicker. The president tried to recover. "We were simply trying to ensure community harmony," she said. Ray set the clipboard down. "No, you attempted to claim ownership. That's not harmony. That's appropriation." The treasurer turned red. The secretary shuffled her papers. One of the neighbors in the back muttered, "Damn." I stepped forward finally. Not angry. Not emotional, just steady. I told them the truth. I told them how my wife and I designed our lives around this lake. How every board, every nail, every afternoon spent fishing was a piece of our history. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand anything. I simply made it clear that this lake was more than water, it was memory. And I wasn't about to let anyone rewrite it. The president exhaled through her nose like she was still trying to salvage the authority she thought she had. "Well, we can bring this to legal mediation if necessary," she said. Ray leaned back in his chair. "It already is. This meeting is being recorded as the official notice of overreach. Any continued enforcement attempts will result in state action." There it was. Not a threat, just consequence. The board didn't dismiss the meeting because they couldn't. They didn't apologize because pride wouldn't let them. They just sat there, speechless, while control slipped through their fingers like water. I turned to leave, and as I passed through the crowd, neighbors parted. Not out of fear, but respect. Real respect. Earned, not taken. I walked back toward my truck, slow and steady. Ray stepped beside me. "You all right?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm all right." But as I closed the truck door, he said something that made my pulse tighten. "They're not done. People like that never quit on the first loss." He was right. The HOA was wounded, and wounded pride can turn vicious. The next move was theirs. Ray was right. People like the HOA board don't back down just because the law tells them to. When someone's whole identity is built on control, losing even once feels like humiliation. And humiliation is gasoline on pride. The first sign came 2 days later. I was out on the dock, early morning again, my fishing line just barely disturbing the glass-still surface of the lake. Mist hung low, drifting like slow breath across the water. The kind of quiet that feels sacred. The kind of quiet most folks don't understand anymore. Then I heard it, the sound of someone clearing their throat behind me. I turned around. It was one of the HOA board members, the treasurer, the thin, twitchy one who always looked like he was waiting to snitch on somebody. He stood on my property line, not stepping past it, not yet, just hovering. "Morning," he said. I didn't respond, not out of rudeness, just because he didn't belong there in that moment. That morning was mine. The lake was mine. The memory was mine. He tried again. "There's been discussion." I reeled in slowly, giving him time to think about whether he wanted to finish that sentence. He swallowed. "Some residents are uncomfortable with the idea of the lake being private. They feel excluded." There it was. The word that cowards use when they want to take something that's not theirs. Excluded. I stood up and set my rod down. I walked to the property line, not threatening, just present. I said, the lake was private when they bought their homes. If they didn't want that, they should have read their deeds before signing. His face twitched, like he wasn't used to someone answering him without apology. "The board is going to revisit the issue," he said. "Maybe propose a community vote." I took a slow breath. You can't vote on something you don't own. That's not democracy. That's theft. His eyes flicked down, then up again. And right there I saw it, the real problem. It wasn't about fishing. It wasn't about rules. It was envy. I had something peaceful, beautiful, untouched. They wanted it. Not for themselves. No. They wanted the power to say they held it. He left without another word. But that wasn't the last of it. Around noon, I started noticing cars slowing down near the shoreline. People I didn't recognize leaning out with phones, taking pictures. One lady actually walked into my yard, right up to the edge of my dock, as if property lines were negotiable concepts. When I told her she needed to leave, she rolled her eyes and said, "Relax. The lake is for everyone." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just pointed toward the survey marker. Bold, clear, permanent, and waited. She turned around and walked off, but she walked with that huffing, offended energy of someone who fully expected the world to rearrange itself for her convenience. By evening, a rumor had already spread. Neighbors were whispering that I was trying to take away their lake. Funny, considering it was never theirs to begin with. But lies spread faster than truth, especially when pride is nursing a bruise. Ray called that night. He said, "They're planning something. I've got a contact inside the municipal zoning office. Expect a complaint filed soon, probably false. Don't react. Just document everything." I sat there in the quiet after he hung up. The porch swing rocked slightly in the breeze. I remembered sitting there with my wife. Her head leaned against my shoulder. Her laugh drifting over the water like music. The way she'd say, "Don't let this place get swallowed up by the world." I wouldn't. The HOA thought this was a game of threats, votes, and social pressure. But I wasn't fighting for power. I was fighting for memory. For peace. For the last piece of my life untouched by grief. And a man fighting for that isn't someone you want to push. They were about to find out the difference between territory and home. 3 days later, the first strike landed. It came in the form of a certified envelope on my doorstep, stamped with that familiar HOA logo and the sort of legal formatting they probably copied from a website called templatethreats.com. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there on the porch, envelope in hand, listening to the hum of the cicadas and the quiet lap of the water against the dock. Eventually, I sat down on the her porch swing, and tore it open. Inside was a formal violation notice claiming I had obstructed community access to shared recreational water, and was now subject to daily fines until I removed the barrier. The barrier, for the record, was my fence. The same fence that had stood there since before half these people had mortgages. They were accusing me of blocking access to land they never owned. And the fines? $150 per day. They really believed money would scare me. But I didn't throw the notice away. No yelling. No pacing. No dramatics. I went inside, scanned the entire document, emailed it to Ray, and went back to my day like nothing had happened. Around sunset, I heard footsteps on my gravel drive. Slow ones. Not timid. Not rushed. The sound of someone who wanted to be seen approaching. I stepped outside. It was the HOA president. She was dressed like she was auditioning to play suburban authority figure, in a commercial blazer, pressed slacks, a clipboard held close to her chest. Her chin was lifted just enough to hint superiority. She said, "Jack, I think we need to discuss how we can resolve this before things get messy." I leaned against the porch railing, calm, grounded. "There's nothing to resolve," I said. "The lake is private property." She smiled, the same thin, sharp-lipped smile as before, the kind that isn't joy, it's sharpening teeth. "You can't own a lake. That's ridiculous." I didn't flinch. "I do." And the state confirmed it. Her smile faded just slightly, but pride wouldn't let her show it. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like she thought this was a negotiation. "Listen, people are upset. This community expects shared access. If you insist on being stubborn, they're going to turn on you. I'm trying to help you avoid that." There it was. Not law, not fairness, not reason, pressure. She wanted me to yield because of social discomfort. I let the silence sit for a moment before answering. "I don't care if they like me," I said. "I didn't buy this lake to make friends." Her eyes narrowed. Then she said something that actually made my jaw tighten. "You're alone here. You really want to be on the wrong side of your entire neighborhood? Alone." She said it so casually, as if being alone was a weakness. As if she knew anything about grief. As if she understood what solitude costs and what it protects. I didn't raise my voice. Not even a little. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "You don't know a thing about what it means to be alone. But you're about to learn what it looks like when a board picks a fight it can't win. No yelling. No threats. Just truth." She stiffened. That perfect posture of hers broke just a fraction. She turned and walked away, her shoes crunching on gravel, each step more rigid than the last. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't say we'll be in touch. She didn't have to, because the fight had officially changed. This wasn't a disagreement anymore. This was war. Not with fists, not with violence, but with something far more devastating to people who cling to control. Law, documentation, sound judgment, and a patience forged in grief. The HOA filed the first attack thinking I would panic. Instead, they poked a man who had already survived the worst pain life had to offer. And a man like that, he doesn't break. He waits. I could feel the shift in the air the next morning, long before anyone said a word to me. It was in the way people looked at my house, the way cars slowed down when passing, the way conversations stopped when I stepped outside like someone had hit a mute button. They didn't shout. They didn't confront. They just watched. It's incredible how quiet hostility can be. I went into town for groceries. Usually the cashier, a sweet woman named Karen, real Karen, not the internet meme version, would ask how I was holding up. But that day, she just rang my items through without a smile. When I thanked her, she nodded but didn't look up. On the drive home, a man walking his golden retriever didn't wave back like he usually did. just stared ahead, jaw tight. It wasn't subtle. The HOA had flipped the narrative. I wasn't the guy trying to protect his property. I was the selfish old man hoarding the lake. It didn't matter that the lake had always been mine. People believe what makes them feel morally superior. The first real blow came that evening. I walked outside to trim some branches when I noticed a group of neighbors gathered on the opposite shore, on their side of the property line. Some stood with arms crossed, some pointing toward the lake, others shaking their heads. Their voices floated across the water. Sharp, bitter, accusing. One man said, "He thinks he's better than us." Another, "It's a lake, not a trophy. He can't just keep it all to himself." Then the president's voice, calm and guiding, like she was teaching children how to hate politely. "We just want fairness. He's being unreasonable." Fairness. There's that word again. A word people weaponize when they want to take something without paying the cost of earning it. I didn't shout back. I didn't defend myself. I simply stood there, pruning shears in hand, breathing slow and steady. But I won't lie, it hurt. Not because I cared what they thought of me, but because I knew how fast community can curdle into mob thinking. Later that night, someone came onto my property. Not to vandalize, not to confront, but to watch. I saw the silhouette from my window, standing near the edge of the dock, not touching anything, not crossing the fence line, just observing. Like they were assessing something, taking mental notes. A scout. When people want to take something, they always send someone to measure the difficulty of the theft. I stepped out onto the porch, staying in the shadows. The person didn't move, didn't speak, didn't run, just looked across the lake, hands in pockets, shoulders hunched slightly. After a while, they turned and walked away. No rush, no fear. They knew this wasn't over. The next day, the accusations started circulating online. Neighborhood Facebook group, Nextdoor app, private group chats. Screenshots made their way to me. Ray emailed them without comment, knowing I needed to see reality clearly, not through rumor. The posts said things like, "Does anyone know why the lake is closed?" And, "Some people don't understand the meaning of community." And, "This is why we need stronger HOA authority." One person wrote, "He thinks the lake is his because his wife died." Tragedy doesn't mean entitlement. I read that line twice, not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. Grief is invisible to the world, and invisible things are easy to step on. I closed my laptop. I walked down to the dock. The lake was quiet, peaceful, still. My wife's reflection used to sit beside mine here. I could almost feel that old warmth, that laughter, that sense of belonging. The neighbors didn't know what I was protecting. They couldn't. But the HOA? They had just changed the battlefield. It wasn't about law anymore. It was about character assassination, social pressure, isolation. They wanted to break me by turning the whole community against me. But I've already lived through a world that went silent. I had survived a grief so loud it drowned out everything. This was just noise. The next morning I woke up before the sun again. But this time it wasn't grief that pulled me out of bed. It was clarity. A different kind of quiet settled in me. Not defeat. Not fear. Preparation. People think strength shows itself in shouting, confrontation, barking back. But real strength is in patience. In watching. In documenting. In letting someone build their own trap while you simply take notes. So that's what I did. I started documenting everything. Time-stamped photos of my fences, screenshots of neighborhood posts, copies of every notice and letter, a detailed log of every conversation. I used to think that writing everything down made you petty, but now I understood it makes you untouchable. By noon I had a binder forming, thick, organized, categorized. When grief tore through my life years ago, I lost structure. Now I had it back, and it felt like rebuilding bone. Around that same time, Ray called. He said, "You're going to start seeing pressure tactics. They want you emotional. Don't give them that." I told him I was already ahead of him. He laughed once, quiet, proud. "That's why I called you," he said. "People forget that I wasn't some quiet man living in a lake house my whole life. I had worked in policy, land use planning. I had written guidelines that the HOA relied on without ever realizing where their rulebook came from. I had spent decades understanding how communities form and how power corrupts them. The HOA thought I was just an older man with a fishing pole. They forgot I was a strategist. That afternoon, I walked the shoreline not to check the water, but to check the survey stakes. Every 50 feet, a small marker indicated the legal boundary line of my property. Most people never noticed them, but I did. Except one wasn't where it should have been. It had been pushed subtly 6 inches inward. Maybe by accident. Maybe not. 6 inches doesn't sound like much until 10 neighbors push 6 inches each. Then suddenly shared shoreline access starts to look confusing. 6 inches can steal acres. I didn't move it back. Not yet. I photographed it, measured it, logged it. Evidence. As I walked back toward the house, I saw the HOA president again. This time standing across the road, pretending to check her mailbox. She wasn't actually looking for mail. She was watching me, monitoring, assessing. People underestimate the value of silence. When you don't react, they get nervous. That night, I heard voices near the property line again. Different ones this time. Younger, hushed, nervous, testing boundaries. I didn't go outside. I didn't yell. I didn't confront. I turned on the motion-activated floodlight instead. Light is a powerful thing. Not dramatic. Not aggressive. Just undeniable. The voices scattered like insects. The next day, I installed 2 cameras. Not hidden, visible. The kind that says, I see you. I hear you. And I remember. I wasn't preparing for the HOA to come at me once. I was preparing for the long fight. And I knew something they didn't. HOA boards burn out. People lose interest. Community outrage has a short battery life. But a man with purpose? He can hold the line forever. Late that evening, I sat on the dock again, watching the sky turn pink and gold. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is exhausting. I was something else now. Steady. My wife used to rest her head on my shoulder and say, "You're always the calm in the storm, Jack." I didn't understand the weight of that back then. I do now. The HOA wanted to fight loud. I was going to fight quiet. Quiet wins. Quiet is patient. Quiet is strategic. Quiet lets your opponent do all the damage to themselves. The lake didn't need me to shout for it. It needed me to stand. And I was ready. A week passed before the next move, and when it came wrapped in the smug confidence of people who believe they found a clever loophole. I received a notice, this time not from the HOA, but from the County Zoning and Environmental Use Office. The envelope was thicker, official, the kind of thing meant to scare a person into compliance before they even read it. Inside was a complaint filed against me, not about the lake itself, but about my dock. The claim said my dock was non-compliant with community shoreline standards and posed a public safety hazard. The HOA had reported it as a shared-use structure requiring HOA inspection and approval. They didn't try to take the lake this time. They went after something smaller, something they thought I wouldn't defend. The dock was where my wife used to sit, where she used to dip her feet in the water, where she laughed, where she fell in love with every day the sun set here. They thought I would give that up easily. They didn't understand me at all. I took the notice, walked inside, placed it gently on the dining table, and dialed Ray. He picked up on the first ring, his voice already tired like he expected this. "Let me guess," he said. "They filed a structural compliance complaint." "Yeah," I said. He sighed. "They're trying to reclassify the dock as a community shareable platform instead of a private use structure. If they succeed, they gain authority over it." I could almost hear his jaw tighten through the phone. "But they won't succeed," he continued. "I'll draft the response, and I'll have a state shoreline assessor out there by tomorrow morning." Most people don't understand how powerful records are until they see them used correctly. When the assessor showed up, he wasn't a man who could be intimidated. He was quiet, polite, and thorough, the kind of person who has measured more docks than the HOA has written fines. He inspected the wood, checked the anchor points, reviewed permits, and confirmed what I already knew. The dock was grandfathered in. built before the subdivision, before the HOA. It was legally untouchable. But the HOA didn't know that yet. Later that afternoon, I saw them gathering across the road. President, treasurer, secretary, a few residents. They stood in a little circle like generals planning a siege. Their eyes flicked toward the lake, toward the dock, toward me. They were waiting for me to panic. I didn't. The assessor handed me the signed verification report. I thanked him and walked, slow and steady, straight across the gravel to where the board stood. Their conversation stopped the moment I stepped closer. The president folded her arms. "We're within our rights to ensure community safety," she said. "No accusation, no anger, just performance." I held up the signed state assessor form. "Your complaint was dismissed. The dock is legally private and predates your HOA charter. You have no jurisdiction." The treasurer's face fell. The secretary blinked rapidly. The president only smiled, but her eyes didn't match the smile. She took one step closer, close enough that I could see the flicker of frustration she was trying to choke down. "You're really willing to alienate the entire neighborhood over this?" I didn't look away. I said, "I lost my wife 3 years ago. This dock is where we spent our best days. And you think you can shame me into giving that up?" Her smile cracked. Silence. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just silence heavy enough to make them feel it. I turned and walked back toward the lake, not once looking back. Behind me, I heard the treasurer say, "He's not backing down." And the president answered, voice low and edged, "Then we push harder." They thought persistence was strength. But persistence without patience is just desperation. They were unraveling, and I was not moving. The next move came faster than I expected. 3 days. That's all it took. 3 days of quiet. 3 days of the neighborhood looking at me differently. Some with sympathy, some with curiosity, some with that look people get when they realize someone might actually win against the HOA. And then, on the 3rd morning, I was sitting at the dock drinking coffee when I heard the crunch of gravel tires up the drive. A sheriff's SUV. Not speeding. Not aggressive. Just confident. He stepped out, adjusting his belt like he'd done this 1,000 times. Tall, early 50s, maybe silver at the temples. A calm sort of presence. Not the kind of guy who wanted trouble, just the kind who knew how to end it. "Morning, sir," he called out. "Morning," I answered. He asked if we could talk. I gestured toward the dock. He hesitated. The HOA president was standing across the road, watching like a hawk. 2 other board members with her. Arms folded. Waiting. The sheriff saw them. He sighed. "Let's talk over here," he said. We walked to the shade by my truck, away from the audience. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Not a warrant. Not a citation. Just a complaint notice. The HOA filed a formal report saying I was creating a hostile environment and threatening neighborhood peace. They claimed neighbors felt unsafe. He looked at me carefully. "I have to ask," he said. "Did you threaten anyone?" "No," I answered. "Did you damage any HOA property?" "No." "Have you blocked anyone from using the lake?" "It's my lake," I said, steady. "But no." He nodded. I could see it in his eyes. He already knew the truth before asking. He took a breath. "Listen, off the record, they didn't call because of anything you did. They called because they want me to intimidate you. They want me to rattle you enough to comply." My jaw clenched. "And are you here to do that?" He cracked a tired half-smile. "No, I'm here because paperwork makes me." He glanced back at the HOA across the road. The president was staring at us, unblinking. "Let me guess," you said. "She's the one who made the call." He didn't answer, but his silence was an answer. Then he said something I did not expect. "You wouldn't happen to be the same Jack who worked with the State Water Commission 5 years back, would you?" I blinked. "Yeah. I was on the Waterway Easement Planning Board for 2 years. He exhaled. "Thought so. I recognized your name. My brother's construction company had to deal with your survey maps. You're the guy who wrote the damn shoreline compliance language for half this region." I didn't brag. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The sheriff turned slowly toward the HOA group, still watching us like a pack of vultures who think they're lions. Then he said, They picked the wrong guy. He folded the complaint paper neatly and slid it back into his pocket. I'll file this as resolved. No action taken. He paused before getting back into his truck. Just be ready. She's not done. People like that don't stop because the law says no. They stop when they're embarrassed. He drove off. Across the road, the HOA president's face was tight, bright red beneath the foundation makeup. She'd expected the sheriff to come in like a wrecking ball. Instead, he left with a quiet nod, which was worse, much worse, because now she knew. I wasn't bluffing, I wasn't folding, and I wasn't scared. She turned away sharply and marched back toward her house. The others followed, whispering. I stood at the edge of my lake, the water calm, sunlight glinting off the ripples. I whispered to myself, maybe to my wife, maybe to fate, you wanted a fight? You've got one. I'd always heard that HOA conflict was like slow poison, drip by drip. But this wasn't slow anymore. They were sprinting. 2 weeks after the sheriff came, I received a certified letter delivered to my door. Signed, sealed, and aggressive. The kind of envelope that already feels hostile before you open it. Inside, notice of intent to initiate legal proceedings. They were taking me to court. Not over the dock. Not over the fishing. Not even over the lake. They claimed I was in violation of community harmony standards, whatever that meant, and that my refusal to comply constituted a willful disruption of neighborhood governance. Basically, they were suing me for not listening to them. They wanted the judge to force me under HOA authority. They wanted control. They wanted submission. I sat there at my kitchen table with that letter in my hands for a long few minutes. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you think about every choice you've made to get to this moment. And then I thought about my wife. How she used to laugh on that dock. How we used to watch the water turn gold at sunset. How this place became home because she loved it. That lake is part of my memory of her. Part of the life we built. Part of the grief I learned to live with. And no committee in khaki capris and HOA name tags was taking that from me. I called Ray. He didn't even say hello. Court letter came? Yep. Good. Let them file. We're ready. You sound confident, I said. He chuckled, quiet, sharp, knowing. Jack. The HOA can't win a case built on jurisdiction they don't have. We're not defending here. We're proving they never had authority to begin with. I exhaled through my nose. Not relief, focus. When's the hearing? 3 weeks, he said. And Jack? Yeah. Don't break. The moment you break, they win through exhaustion. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. I won't. The neighborhood watched everything now. When I walked to my truck. When I mowed my yard. When I sat at the dock. Some people waved. Some avoided eye contact. Some whispered like kids who think whispering is quiet. But the one who didn't hide? The HOA president. She walked by every day. Slow. Deliberate. Just so I'd see her. Power move. Where she thought it was. One afternoon, she stopped at the end of my driveway. You know, she said, voice sweet like poison masked in honey. This would all go away if you just sign the membership acknowledgement. You don't have to make this so painful. I didn't get up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't posture. I just said, this isn't about a membership form. This is about control. Her smile didn't crack, but her eyes did. She leaned in slightly, her tone dropping to something more real. You're setting a dangerous example. There it was. Not about harmony. Not about rules. Not about community. She was afraid I'd show people they didn't have to be bullied. I set my coffee down and answered, maybe they needed an example. She took one small step back. Only one. But it was enough. She turned and walked away. The court date approached. The air got thick. Like everyone in the neighborhood was waiting for a storm. Some rooting for me. Some rooting against me. But the thing about storms is, nobody controls where lightning strikes. And I wasn't the one standing on the tallest hill with a metal pole. They were. The courthouse wasn't anything dramatic. No marble pillars or grand steps. Just a square brick building with fading paint and a lobby that smelled like old carpet and weak coffee. But somehow, walking through those glass doors felt like crossing a battlefield. Ray met me inside. Dark suit, sharp eyes, carrying a binder so thick it could have doubled as a cinder block. When he handed it to the clerk actually raised an eyebrow. HOA filings? He asked. Ray nodded. The clerk just whistled low, like he knew exactly what kind of petty war this was. We took our seats. The HOA board sat across the aisle, all clustered together. The president was front and center, hands folded, chin up, wearing that same pinched smile she always used when she thought she was being admired. Her lawyer looked uncomfortable, not nervous, just aware that this wasn't going to go how she told him it would. When the judge entered, everyone stood. He was older, glasses low on his nose, the kind of man who'd seen every flavor of neighborhood nonsense and didn't have patience for people who mistook petty power for governance. We sat. The HOA's lawyer spoke first. He launched into a speech about rules, community, harmony, shared expectations, collective responsibility. All the buzzwords they'd rehearsed. The president nodded along like she was leading a church choir. Then he said, "The defendant has repeatedly refused to acknowledge the homeowner association's authority, thereby endangering the social structure necessary for neighborhood cohesion." The judge stopped writing, looked up slowly. Endangering the social structure? The lawyer swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge leaned back slightly, like he was resisting the urge to roll his eyes. Then he turned to Ray. "Your response?" Ray stood quietly. No theatrics, no swagger, just a man holding the truth. "Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate two key facts. First, the property in question predates the HOA. Second, the lake and surrounding shoreline fall under state water authority, not private association jurisdiction. The HOA has no legal claim, no regulatory power, and no standing to demand compliance of any kind." The judge raised a hand. "Wait, this lake is under state jurisdiction?" Ray opened the binder. "Not only that, Your Honor, but my client, Mr. Jack Thompson, authored part of the shoreline classification policy adopted statewide in 2019. We have documentation of his commission role, his planning board contributions, and his mapping survey authority acknowledgement." The courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't need to. It just shifted. A physical, undeniable shift. The judge looked at me, really looked, and I could see the realization settle in. This wasn't a stubborn homeowner. This was someone who knew the law because he helped write the damn thing. The HOA president's smile finally broke. Her lawyer turned 2 shades paler. Ray continued, "The HOA attempted to claim authority that legally does not and has never belonged to them. They knowingly harassed my client, filed baseless complaints, made false allegations to law enforcement, and attempted coercion through legal intimidation. Your Honor, this is not a governance dispute. This is abuse of power." The judge closed the folder, sat back, let out a slow breath like he'd just solved a puzzle he didn't enjoy solving. "This case is dismissed," he said, "with prejudice, meaning they couldn't try again." But he wasn't finished. He turned to the HOA president. "And I strongly suggest your board review state jurisdiction boundaries before attempting to enforce rules you do not have the authority to enforce." It was polite, official, measured. But the message was clear. Sit down. We left the courtroom. No cheers. No triumph music. Just quiet. But sometimes quiet is victory. When we stepped into the parking lot, the HOA president followed. Her voice was smaller now. "Tight. You made a fool of me." I turned. "No, I just didn't let you make one of me." She didn't have a comeback. She just walked away. Not confident. Not powerful. Just ordinary. The neighborhood changed after that. People waved now. People stopped to talk. People asked questions not about drama, but about rights. Boundaries. What they were actually allowed to say yes or no to. Maybe I didn't just win. Maybe I freed a few people who didn't know they were being controlled. And when I sat on my dock that evening, sun melting across the lake, I whispered softly, "We're still here. Me, the lake, the memories, the peace." And nobody was taking any of it away. Before I end this story, I want to say something real. When somebody tries to take what matters to you, your home, your peace, your memories, you have every right to stand your ground. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of love. This lake wasn't just water. It was my past, my healing, my life. And nobody has the right to take that from you. Not a board, not a committee, not anybody. If you've ever been pushed around, silenced, or made to feel small, I hope this story reminds you that you can fight back. And you can win. Thank you for being here with me through this whole journey. I don't know where you are watching from, but I'm glad you're here. If you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe, like, and drop a comment. It means more than you know. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, stay steady, and never let anyone take your peace.